Hello,
Okay.
I have Emmy from Uganda here today. Hi, Emmy.
Hi, Jitka.
Hello. Please tell me about the situation about the coronavirus in Uganda.
All right, thank you. So we have 44 cases confirmed in Uganda at the moment. So we are pretty much at the earlier stages compared to where it is in Europe. So the situation in Uganda at the moment, uh, uh, at the beginning of this week on Monday, the president, the government announced the 14-day lockdown. What that implies is that everybody is supposed to keep home. So this is day 2 for me working from home. So everybody then keeps home and works from home. So all schools are closed. Actually, the schools are closed for 32 days. No going to church. Church now is done online. So people, most of the churches are either on TV or they're on Facebook. Even marriages. So you're allowed maximum of 10 people at a wedding. Some weddings can go on, but maximum 10 people. And in Uganda, weddings are really a big thing. An average wedding in Uganda is about 400 people. So you can imagine what that means to have a 10 people wedding versus
That's a
400.
huge difference.
Some of the new measures that have been put in place as well is that even cars, you're now not allowed to drive on the road. So you have to have special, you have, yeah, you have to have special permission to actually drive on the road. So only the essential shops are kept open. So shops that are selling food, shops that are selling medicine, those are actually open and they're allowed to work. And also the factories that are manufacturing essential items have also been allowed to work. But then you have to have a special pass which you have on your sticker to drive around. So, everybody is pretty much at home right now. Those who are still working have to work from home, which is a new experience for us. So, yeah, so that's what's happening from a corona perspective here.
Okay, and are there any ways how the government is encouraging people to follow the rules? For example, if there are people who don't want to follow these rules, are there any fines for them or any punishment?
Yeah, so I think in terms of obeying the rules, so far it's been good. I think the public has understood what the situation is. Obviously, because we have access to what's happening across the world. We saw what happened in China. We can see what's happening in Europe, especially in Italy and now Spain. So all that information is filtering through to Uganda. So when the public had these measures, they were really prepared for them because they knew that would be the reaction. So I think in terms of obedience of the measures, it's pretty good. However, having said that, the biggest challenge we're really going to face is most of the population actually lives on hand to mouth. So it's not a salary at the end of the month. So it's usually payment every day. So I think when it passes the first week, the strain is really going to be hard. And it's just going to be so hard for people to follow the rules because they simply won't have anything to eat, especially those who are earning who are used to being paid on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's going to be a challenge. What we have seen is some enforcement of the rules on the road as well. So you have traffic police who are actually stopping cars. So initially, the initial rule the government gave was you can't drive your car, but maximum 3 people per car. So that has also been stopped. So right now you have traffic on the road. If you drive out your car, you have to show that you have the sticker. If you don't have the sticker, then you're asked to park your car and probably go back. I'm actually not so sure what they're doing because right now they're also trying to decongest the jails. So people who have petty crimes and are in prison are being released versus those who have serious crimes. So just to encourage the decongestion. So I think the obedience for the rules is going to be easier for the first week. But again, going into the second week, when people don't have what to eat, that's going to be really a big challenge, especially for those who are not working.
And what about the government? Do they try to address these issues that you just mentioned, or they didn't say really anything about it yet because they are just waiting how it will work?
Yeah, so we've heard about I think 5 or 6 addresses from the president every in the last 2 weeks, which is pretty a lot. So there's been a lot of visibility from the government. Yesterday, in the address to the nation, actually, the president came on to address some of the concerns that the citizens had raised. So, for example, when he announced the 14-day lockdown. there was a bit of ambiguity. For example, he had mentioned that malls are closed, but supermarkets should keep open. So he had to come and clarify what kind of outlets need to keep open, which is those that are selling food. For example, he had also said that construction sites, if people are having construction, they can continue the construction so long as the workers are living on the site or are camping on the site. However, shops for the hardware where they buy the construction material were closed. So he needed to clarify that, and he clarified it by saying those shops will remain closed. So if you have material to construct, you can go ahead with it. If you don't have material, then you'll have to wait after the 14 days. So it's really only outlets that are selling food items and outlets that are selling medicine that are allowed to actually operate. Then there was also another ruling, for example, which they said all the local districts, so Uganda is divided into districts. So the government officials who have government cars have to give their cars to the health ministry to support with Corona. So because they are going to stay home. So he also had to come and clarify and say, it doesn't matter what job you're doing in the government, but if you work at the district and you have a government car, you should actually hand it over to the Ministry of Health so that they can use it for the corona rounds. Then there was also something around you need to get permission if you need to leave your home, and he had to clarify what those emergencies mean, what kind of permission require. So if you're probably sick, if maybe somebody's pregnant and they need to either give birth or get checked up, that's also an emergency. But for some of the issues, it won't be called out as an emergency. So if you've had a fight with your neighbor and it's not that serious, that won't be treated as emergency. That can be sorted. So yeah, and I think because this is really new, we've not had anything like this in our generation. So I think there will still be need for more clarification as we go through these uncharted waters. This is unlike something we've seen before in our generation. And I think for us, Uganda, especially for the youth, it's especially different. So I think for the older generation who have been through a period of wars, so we had civil wars in Uganda in the 70s and in the 80s, they've probably experienced something close to this where you have curfews, because one of the other things is we have a curfew. So from 7 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. in the morning, you shouldn't be leaving your house. You're not even allowed to walk around. That is all pretty new for us. So that's something the government will have to keep on clarifying and getting back to us. Yeah.
How does the government pass the information to make sure that everyone in the country knows about it? Like even people in remote areas?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, so what I've seen is, when the presidential addresses are happening, they're usually happening at around 8 p.m. At that point, all the TV stations in the country and all the radio stations are supposed to broadcast that. So even in the remote areas where they won't have access to TV, they'll actually have access to a radio station. And all the radio stations at that point in the country are broadcasting the same message. So that's one of the ways that the message is going through. Another thing we've seen as well is usually there's a summary of the speech that's then shared through WhatsApp. But I think it's been a double-edged sword on WhatsApp. So a lot of the information that is shared actually goes viral and is shared through WhatsApp. But then what we've also seen happen on WhatsApp is some of the fake news or information also spreads as well. So I think, especially around social media, there's a bit of sieving that we're being forced to do. When you get something on social media, you kind of have to verify with another source if this is really official or if it's just fake news that's going around. So yeah, so it's mainly been through the broadcasts, a lot happening through WhatsApp as the smartphone penetration grows up, and just basically through the radio stations. So you also have the local governments going onto the radio stations to speak to the masses. That's in addition to things like the newspapers as well. But I think it's mainly the presidential addresses on radio and TV, and then the radio programs.
And I have last question. How does it work when you want to go shopping for food? Do you need to have permission to leave your home to go shopping?
Yeah.
And then when you go to the shop, is there any requirement, for example, how many people can go inside at one time, or if you need to wear masks, gloves, anything like that?
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question. I think there's three parts to that. So I think firstly, the shops that have food are open, and in most cases, you'll pretty much have a small shop near your house, so you're able to walk there and actually buy. You are allowed to walk. The curfew only kicks in at 7 p.m., so you are allowed to walk. But related to that as well, we have what we call locally as border borders. So there are people who ride bicycles, motorcycles, who do a lot of transportation. So there's a really growing home delivery trend that's now growing because of this lockdown with those border borders. So whether it's e-commerce, some of the online platforms, but also just locally. So people call up those border borders or the motorcycles, and then who go and pick and deliver stuff for them at home. But movement is allowed if you are on foot during the day. Then thirdly, as well, in the shops or the supermarkets, they have now this week they have actually begun enforcing how many people can enter the supermarket. So which means you have to have people lining up on the outside, and they're limiting the numbers that actually go into the supermarkets. But I think that is another thing that is I think it's not being complied with 100%. It varies. So the more organized shops and supermarkets are doing it. Some of the smaller shops are probably not following that as much. But I think, from a government perspective, what we have seen is even with some of what we call the LDUs, the local defense units, we've actually seen that enforce it on the ground to minimize the number of people. And actually, what they have actually mentioned is we shouldn't have more than 5 people congregating. So generally, for whatever reason, not more than 5 people allowed to be together out in the open. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for telling me so many information about Uganda.
Yeah, all we can do is pray now. All right. Thank you, Jitkan. All the best. All right. Bye. Cheers.
Bye bye.